Hey guys, what's going on? Jacob here. So in our final video on JavaScript, we're going to talk about JSON. As you start out with JavaScript, you're probably not going to come across this all that often, but JSON is used a lot with AJAX calls, so you will eventually get to it. And we'll go over some of the basics of it today. So let's get started. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it's used for exchanging data with other programs and even programming languages. As I mentioned before, you see JSON used a lot with AJAX calls. While we'll talk more about AJAX after we talk about SQL and MySQL, essentially AJAX goes into the database, gets data, and presents it in a way we can use it in JavaScript. And that data is transferred through JSON. But JSON isn't another programming language. Essentially, it's just text and numbers. The basic syntax for JSON is pretty easy. In fact, it's just like a normal JavaScript object, hence the name JavaScript Object Notation. But there are a few rules about how JSON data should be presented. The data must be in name-value pairs, similar to arrays, and those data items must be separated by a comma. Objects are held by curly brackets, and arrays are held by straight brackets. Basically, all of our usual data types can be used in JSON. The only exception are functions, undefined, and dates. We'll talk more about this when we get to AJAX, but in order to pass a date through JSON, we first must change it into a string. But don't worry, there are functions to do that. Otherwise, strings, integers, floats, arrays, objects, and the like are able to go through JSON. Like I mentioned before, JSON objects are set between curly brackets, and then you set the key value pairs separated by commas. You can also nest objects by making an object the value for a key. Accessing JSON objects is basically the same as accessing normal JavaScript objects. You'll use the object's variable name, a dot, and then the name of the key that you're looking for. You can also loop through a JSON object the same you would a normal JavaScript object or array. And finally, you can use delete to delete an object's property. Arrays in JSON also behave the same way they do in normal JavaScript. You can define an array by putting the items for the array inside of straight brackets. After that, you can get items from that array or loop through the array the same way you would in normal JavaScript. Well, we won't get to this until we get to AJAX. When we receive JSON from our AJAX program, we need to first parse it before we can use it. In other words, we're going to have to take it from a string into a JSON object that our JavaScript can read. Fortunately, that's really easy to do with the parse function. This takes in one parameter, the string of JSON that we need to parse. Typically, this function is used right after you get a response from AJAX. And again, we'll get to that when we get to AJAX. And the reverse of parse is to take an array or object that we have and turn it into a string that we can use with AJAX. And just like parsing, it's super simple. All we need to do is use the stringify function. This parameter accepts one function, the array or object that we're trying to turn into a string. We then pass this new string along into AJAX to be used in another program or programming language. So now comes the big question. What can you do with JSON? Well, the main thing is that JSON can be sent to and from the server. That means we can pull information from a database and display it with JavaScript and not use PHP. Plus, JSON puts JavaScript data into a string which any other programming language can use. That means we can basically send it wherever we want. And that's really cool. Well, that's all for today, and that's all for JavaScript. For now. Next week we'll start with databases and SQL. In the meantime, do you have any questions over what we went over today or anything you have with JavaScript? Leave them down in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. But until next time, good luck and happy coding.